Ever wonder what makes really creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how new ideas come to life and become paintings, sculptures, plays, or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community and explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. Today, I'll be ArtStorming with Ann Laser. And if you've ever dreamed that you might someday be an artist but you think it's too late for you, you might think again after you hear Ann's story. Ann was always creative, and deep in her heart, she knew she would someday be an artist, but then life happened. Marriage, children, career, etc. And it wasn't until she began to foster the creativity in her own children that Ann finally got a chance to delve into her own artistic potential. In the meantime, Ann had developed a career as a psychotherapist, and during a weekend retreat assignment with a group of fellow therapists who were reading the well-known book Women Who Run with the Wolves, Ann had one of those turning point moments. Here's what happened. I'm with Ann Laser, and Ann is maybe one of the first people I met when I moved to Santa Fe. A great mutual friend of ours from Arkansas was the source of our meeting.
Oh, that's right.
And we've just been buds ever since. Yeah. So I'm thrilled to be with her in yet a new studio. This is new to me. Is this all yours now? Are you sharing it with anybody?
Yeah, no.
Okay, so it's great.
Since I was sharing across the street with Patricia, and we no longer sharing, she had to move home, and now I have this little tiny place.
Well, it's great. I'm so thrilled to see that you're still up and at it. I mean, you've had, we talked a little bit off tape about, the setbacks that you experienced during COVID. I mean, one of the questions that I'm leading with is to say a little something about yourself that our listeners would not be able to find out about you or know about you from looking at your website, because obviously you have a professional presence, and I want to give them just a little insight into who you are that's not on your website. So anything you feel interested to share about that. I think the reason that I'm interested in that is because, as I know, but my listeners don't know, you came to the art game a little bit later in life, and your way of getting here was fascinating. I don't know how much of that you share on your website, but maybe that would be a good place to start.
Okay. A lot of this on the website, it's more streamlined. So I started actually becoming interested in art when my youngest daughter was in grade school and was winning art contests at school. And so I'd always been interested in art in a general way. I always took my children I have 3 children. The oldest now is 60, then the 56 and 52, I think. Anyway, but the youngest was really talented. Her name is Amy Laser, and she still does art. She's also a psychotherapist, as I am. And so I took a class with her it's amazing what you'll do with your children, just to stay in contact with them. But anyway, so that's the first of actually doing any instructed art. And I had a really fun time, but that was one year and things went on. But I always kind of in the back of my mind, probably even since I was a child, and I grew up in not a very well-to-do family, and there were 5 children, and I wanted to take art lessons. But as a child, I remember this, and we couldn't afford it. I mean, that was just out of the question. So it's like it's always been there. And then I was at a retreat with a number of women friends, and I'm a psychotherapist, so I've been doing this for 45 years. So it was a group of therapists, and we were reading Women Who Run with the Wolves. And so we were talking about it, and then we were assigned a project, an art project to do. And I remember, I'll show it to you, they can't see it, but this is what I came up with.
Oh, wow.
And I still have it.
So describe for us what we're looking at, so that it's not a visual.
Somewhat of a little pitiful sculpture on a small wooden platform, and then it's made of various throwaway materials. There's a, what is this called? What are these? A cylinder that's made of cardboard, and then I've got a piece of cloth wrapped around it, and the inside the cylinder is a piece of a stick,
a driftwood.
Like. Yeah. And if you look at it correctly, you can see a woman's face.
Yeah. Well, no, it has a chrome quality to it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then gray hair, a gray yarn, and she's got a
walking stick.
A walking stick, and her hand is supposed to be glued to it, but it doesn't stay there. Anyway, that was it. It was the reason I kept that. In talking with that group at that time, I told them that while I was doing this, I just knew that I was going to be an artist. It was just like there was no music, there was no drum roll. It's just a knowing that just settled.
Well, in all the conversations we've had, I actually didn't know this story, so this is actually this is great because I'm learning something too.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it. But I didn't really get involved with learning, taking lessons, all that kind of stuff. For a number of years later, I don't really remember the amount of time. But then when I finally did start taking lessons regularly, I did work with a private instructor, a good artist in our town.
Sculpture, painting?
I was doing painting.
Okay.
And that's how I started my journey, more specifically.
And this is still while you were in Arkansas?
Yeah. And every chance I got, I like to travel, as you know, I really like it a lot. And so I've had fortunate times of going to art museums, wonderful art museums around the world. So I was always going and looking at other people's art. But gradually, I think I was painting little impressionistic landscapes. And I had a good friend in the town who owned a gallery, and she started showing my work, and it started selling. And it just was kind of crazy that and it just sort of it happened pretty quickly.
What did it feel like to sell that first piece?
Oh, I know I was excited, but I really can't remember which one it was or anything.
But since you already knew you were going to be an artist, this was more like a confirmation of your direction.
Yeah, actually was. And then I just kept taking lessons, and I love this story. One day, my very good friend, Ann Lovren, came to my home and found me painting in my little basement. And it was pretty dark down in that basement. I mean, there was a lamp or something. And Ann said, "What world are you doing? Take that upstairs." And I had a dining room that had windows all the way around. She said, "You do that." And so I did that because I listened to Ann when she tells me something. And so I did that. I started improving.
You could see what you were doing.
Yes, I could see what I was doing. And so I again don't know a lot about the time frame. It wasn't long, wasn't years. It was months or a few years. I was getting ready I had a building that I was using. I had purchased an beautiful old house in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And that was my office. And I was getting ready to sell that building and move to a different location. And again, Ann was in on this. She came up and she said, "Now is the time for you to get into a space that's big enough for a studio." So we actually found a beautiful historic building. I was on the second floor. I had brick walls and tin ceiling. It was just perfect. And I had a section built for the office part. And then the rest of it was huge with high ceilings. And that was my studio. It was really beautiful.
Wow.
And that's how. So you need a little help from your friends,
Yeah.
And that's how I started. And then it just kept growing. And how did I come out here? Oh, I remember I came out here.
Out here being Santa Fe, just because we haven't established that.
Oh, okay, yeah, Santa Fe. It was a friend and I, and she was a therapist too, and we decided we would teach workshops in places we wanted to go. Her name was Gladys, and we were working with families who own family businesses. That's quite a population, I can tell you. But anyway, so we had picked Santa Fe as a place to, and we got enough people that showed up for that. So that's why we were here in Santa Fe. And that was the year I had started really seriously doing art and selling art and really putting myself more in that art realm. So we were here and 9/11 hit.
Oh, wow. And like while you were actually here?
While we were here.
So needless to say, it's September.
Workshop.
It's September 11th, and you're here in Santa Fe.
Yeah. And you can imagine what a jolt that was. I mean, just for everybody. It was for everyone. But I wasn't at home with my family, and we couldn't get transportation from here. And so she lived in Colorado, so she was able to get transportation more quickly than I. But I just went to art galleries, and I hiked a lot, and I just fell in love with Santa Fe. And then as time went on, I started coming here more and more for workshops or just to come out here and paint. And then I met a lot of really wonderful people who encouraged me, and that's how I got started. That's basic.
But there's a really kind of interesting twist, because you did something that a lot of women might not have the courage to do, and that is you followed your dream. So say a little bit more about, so you've established Santa Fe as an intriguing place for you. You've got a little bit of groundwork that you've started, but then you took the big step. So talk about the big step.
Oh yeah, well that was a big step. Well, I was coming here more and more, and my husband David said, well, why don't you just buy something there? Why don't you just buy some? And I just thought, I couldn't do that. I knew I had the money from that building I'd already sold, but I just thought, I can't do that. And so he talked to our grown daughters. They were in their 20s, I think, or a little older, and they were both artists. And he mentioned that he thought it would be a good idea for me to buy something. And they had me in the car that following weekend on the way out here. and think it'll go away, So, and we found the condo that I live in now. And they're such a part of the story, both of them artists, and they've always supported my interest, and we've done a lot of collaboration. It's really exciting to me.
Well, what's also really amazing about this is that your husband was really supportive, and even though you spent increasingly more time here in Santa Fe, he continued to live in Arkansas.
Oh, yeah,
so talk about people to have separate bathrooms. Yeah. Some people have separate sinks. Some people have separate bathrooms, and then you had separate houses for a while.
Yeah.
So,
and David says, when people ask him, well, how do you make that? How do you do that? And he said, well, she gets to do what she loves. I get to do what I love, and it doesn't get any better than that. And they said, well, you've been married 60 years. What? How is that possible? And he said, well, we live in different states.
So it's actually supported the marriage that you are living in separate states.
But he's always been my biggest supporter as far as my making art, and helped me be able to do this and to live. As we've aged, we don't get to go back and forth as much. We used to, once every month or 6 weeks, he would be here or I would be there. But it's not that easy now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you started with a sort of a coven of women who were, reading Women Who Run with the Wolves, because Santa Fe is very much, in some ways, an extension of that kind of community. It's lot of women who support each other, a lot of women artists. And so, it was probably easy for you to find your way here.
Well, yeah, I found it very easy to be absorbed into the art community. And it helps that I'm an extrovert, so I really didn't hold back. I just met a lot of people. and so that's how it happened, And Santa Fe is really unique in that way. It's called the City Different. And there's a reason. It is very different. And so the artist community just nurtured me.
Well, it seems like you've always listened and had good women friends. How are the women friends you've had here in the arts community different from the women friends that you had in other communities?
Well, I'm a licensed professional counselor. When I was younger, and I did a lot of collaboration across the state with different people and different things, that's what I wanted to focus on more. So, yes, I met people. One of the ones I met, I wish you could interview her sometime, Patricia Pierce. She's the head of the printmaking and book arts program at the Santa Fe Community College. She started it, and she has helped it grow. It's phenomenal. So I had taken a workshop from Ron Picasso, who's a really fine printmaker artist here. And after I moved here, he suggested I meet Patricia. Well, my life changed dramatically with Patricia, and we became very close friends. She was my teacher and helped me open up to more ways to express myself artistically. And now that I mentioned Ron Picasso, he got me interested in printmaking, which I love, which helped me move artistically. My style started to change. I didn't just sit down and say, I'm going to change my style. It just started to evolve into much more abstract work than I had started with. And printmaking was a big plus for that, and I highly recommend anyone who's interested in dabbling in art to take printmaking. I do monoprints, and they're very spontaneous, and so anyone can do it. And you don't have to be able to draw, and I'm not a great I don't draw that well. I can draw, but anyway, so she was teaching that class, and that's how we became close friends. And how much more do you want? Then she was already very much a part of the art community here in Santa Fe, and so she helped nurture me becoming more. I don't know, selling my work in a bigger way than I ever had in Arkansas.
So she helped you find a gallery here? Is that?
Yes, and she was in a artist-owned gallery, formerly known as a co-op, but we don't like that word because the people have a mistaken idea of what that is. But a group of artists that already started, and so I joined them, and I was with that gallery a couple of years. I think it was called Artistas. And then some of us from that group decided to move to Canyon Road. And
which for our listeners is one of the premier art roads. How many galleries are there? Something like,
I don't know, hundreds.
Hundreds of galleries.
Santa Fe, just for their listening, the education, it is the third largest art market in the world. Santa Fe, little old Santa Fe. So Canyon Road is a really famous art area in Santa Fe, and it's been around for years and years, and it's very well respected. And so before I knew it, I was in a gallery on Canyon Road, and I had started painting in my basement.
In Arkansas.
In Arkansas, when I was 59. So I was already, I guess I turned 60 by the time I was out here. So, but I was a very young 60.
Yeah, I'm sure you're still a very young whatever you are. I'm not even going to say the age.
So it was just, and that still amazes me.
Yeah.
that, how does that happen? I don't know how that happens, but
well, one foot in front of the other,
I guess
literally.
So, yeah. And I work in the gallery almost once a week, and I meet a lot of people just everywhere, and I meet a lot of women who I can tell they're interested in my story, and I tell the story of starting later, and it is very inspiring to particularly women, but men too, that you can really do that. You can switch gears in such a profound way at that age. So
yeah, and somebody who has sort of a psychological background, I would imagine that you, in a way, can offer insight into what it's like, just the psychological process of going from one geographic area as, known in your community in one way, and then kind of switching gears and all of the, I don't know if you received any pushback or whether the internal pushback from your own, the voices in your head. But since you can speak with some authority on this sort of psychological process of that shift, would you speak to that a little bit in your own experience?
Well, when I was in Arkansas and I just, had started doing art, it was before I even started coming out here, I think. Yeah, it was. But I knew something was happening. And some people called it Saturn return. I had people label all this, I've forgotten what they were. But I slept very little. And I usually sleep 8 hours, period.
So this wasn't typical perimenopause?
No, I was past menopause. So I would be awake with that energy. It was so much energy, it felt like the top of my head would come off sometimes. And so the way I got through that was I didn't do painting or anything like that at night. I didn't want to wake David up, but I would write poetry. That's how I got through it. I just wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'm not a poet, but I thought of it as a way to ride across that river, the river that was so tumultuous at that point.
On accessing the unconscious. And
yeah. And writing my dreams down, but mainly I just wrote poetry. I have that in my back pocket now as an idea. When I finally get old,
never going to happen.
when I get old, if I can't be as active or can't, I'm going to pick up writing poetry again as a way to keep myself interested.
And say a little bit about how it differs for you from painting in terms of the experience in your head.
Well, it is more of a head experience. For me, painting, my art, doing art, is very intuitive. And to some extent, writing poetry is too. It just comes to me, But then you have to play around with art words, and you have to, it takes a little more of using your frontal lobe to complete that. But for me, making art is totally intuitive. I don't think of it ahead of time. I mean, I don't plan, I'm going to do this sort of painting or this sort of piece.
How do you switch off the intellectual component or the judge or the critic while you're doing that?
I don't know. It's very natural for me to do that. Now, we'll talk about that later, about COVID. That's kind of stymied me a little bit. But the thing that I want to bring up is that doing therapy with people, there's a bridge. They're so similar for me to doing art, because when I'm with people and we're talking about their deep life, I have to be at a deep place too. I'm not an observer. I'm right down there with them in a very deep place. And that's the place I go to do art.
So do you ever see one of your clients' stories sort of show up on a canvas?
I don't know. I never thought about it. I don't know. But there's a cross pollination off with everybody. What shows up is a surprise, really.
Mm-hmm. And rolling with the surprise and going to the next place, yes. I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. And some of the surprises are not fun. I don't like don't like some things.
Well, as a therapist, when you're an active listener, do you think that learning the art of active listening, you are able to turn in on yourself and be an active listener to your own experience and then have a conversation with that and it comes out, or is it not that cerebral?
Well, yeah, no, I have a conversation with the piece of art.
Say more about that.
Well, sometimes the piece of art can be very contrary, and it won't do what I want it to do. and sometimes I cuss at it. And but the way I experience it, some pieces go together really well and are very flowing, but some are just really cantankerous. And so the piece of art it's not, I know I'm not envisioning it as a person, but it has something similar to a person.
Well, is it like the muse that wants to come through or something?
No, it's the painting that wants to be a contrary child.
And so do you talk to it the same way you would a contrary client?
I don't have any contrary clients. They're all good. I really don't. But no, it's just the...
so do you ever have to punish a painting by just putting it aside and saying, I'm not going to... Or do you wrestle it to the ground all the way?
Well, sometimes most wise people that have done art a long time know to just put it away and come back to it later. I mostly can't do that. So, oh my goodness, I have one that is still... It's at my office now. And it's a big canvas, but I had done some work on it. I don't remember what was under it, but I was so mad that it wasn't working that I put blue paint all over it. And it turned out good, and I call it Blue Explosion because I was so mad. And then I have one other one. I had really worked on it. I was doing small monoprints and attaching them to a big canvas, so I had to go all the way downstairs in that studio and do the monoprint on a press that we had downstairs, then I walk back up and put it on that canvas. So I had all the canvas with all these little monoprints on it, and it looked awful. And I'd worked and worked and worked. And so I just threw ink. I threw ink on it. I'm not going to say that word.
You can say anything you want.
Well, I thought, oh shit, now what have I done? And then so I got it down and started patting it off, getting some of that off. And lo and behold, it turned out so good because that ink pulled it together. It just was magical. So that's...
And so those two pieces, are they pieces that you sort of keep around that remind you of those more kind of controversial conversations? That
well, the blue one I do. I'd sell it in a minute and it just hasn't sold.
I think it likes you.
I know, maybe that's it.
It's like those boys in grammar school that pull your hair because they like you.
Yeah. It probably is, yeah. So that's how I do. I mean, and then sometimes they come together. This last piece that I mentioned to you earlier, this big piece, it'll show at the gallery next year, early next year. But it was really hard. I couldn't get into it. I'll talk about the tea bag project.
Yeah.
The beginning of the tea bag project is relevant to what I'm going to say. About, I think it was 8 years ago, I happened to see one of the tea bags that I was using, and it was on the counter and it dried, and I thought, what a beautiful color that is. And so I just thought, well, I used to every other year a big recycle show here in Santa Fe, and I thought, well, I'll just save those and see if I can do something art with that.
So it's a show that showcases artwork that's been made with recycled materials, right?
Mm-hmm. And so then I just couldn't wait. We had a event out on Canyon Road where we were outside painting or doing our thing, and I had my tea bags out there. And people came by and loved them. They just loved what I was doing with it. So I had great conversations, and that inspired me to keep using tea bags as a material to do art with. And then it was very shortly after that I woke up with this great idea in my mind. Woke up with that in my mind. Well, just collect tea bags from all over the world. And you know me, I'm not usually given to be grandiose. And so to think, I'll just collect from all over the world. That seems weird, but it wasn't weird to me because I made little.
So just to be clear, we're talking about used tea bags that have been soaked in tea, in water, and then is the tea, the actual black tea, still in it, or herbal tea, or is it? So it's still they're intact, they're just dry.
Really nice. And I would started giving people a little card that said, "Save your tea bags for 2 weeks, let them dry," because they knew they were to use them, and then mail them to me. And this is very touching to me. They have, at their own expense, really, it's amazing. People taking the time to do that.
To send you tea bags from all over the world.
Mainly the U.S., but out of the U.S. too.
And so how did the word get out that you were collecting tea bags?
Well,
these postcards?
I give that little card
to people who came into the gallery on Canyon Road. Yeah. And then suddenly it spread like wildfire.
Yeah, it was over time. And then people, this was another amazing thing. People would save and then come back to see me and bring these big sacks full of used tea bags. And one very sweet couple from Texas would come back every year. They would go to the opera here, and so they would come back, and he wasn't a tea drinker, but she occasionally had a cup of tea, and so she would have little boxes, really very beautiful boxes with the tea bags laid in perfectly in line, and the strings placed just perfectly. It was like a piece of art that she did and would bring every year, something new. They don't still. I haven't seen them at the COVID thing. I think stopped them from. But it was people like that would come back, and they come back even if they didn't donate. They still do. They'll come back to see what I'm doing with the tea bags, and it's amazing to me. People love this tea bag story.
Well, and then you took it the next step, Miss Not Grandiose, which wasn't grandiose at all. It was just, it was amazing heart thing. So talk about the tea bag project.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, actually. The project itself was started with that. And I named it the Tea Bag Project right off the bat. And people started. Then I teamed up with a person who was helping promote me and the work. We became very close friends. And then we developed a clothing line from the art that I was making. And not directly. We would take photos of the tea bag art and then send them to a manufacturer in LA, and they would produce the garment. And so the first time we had a little style show at the gallery, and I saw people walking around with my art on. That would just blew my mind. I thought, and it was very touching. I think I cried. I thought, to see that happening,
Well, the thing that you're not saying that maybe, it was a part of the Tea Bag Project that I really loved was that this idea that it was, creating peace one cup of tea at a time. And that there was this sort of infusion of really taking that moment that we pause in our day to sip on a cup of tea, and that you were imbuing your canvases and your artwork with this peaceful moment. Yeah. And so that the artwork then took on this sort of accumulation of peaceful moments, which was, generating more peace in the world. And so I just thought that was such a genius.
The motto is still of the Tea Bag Project is world peace through inner peace, 1 cup of tea at a time.
There it is.
And people love that. And this last week I talked to people, about 2 or 3 people, and they love the idea because, well, I'm assuming people want to be part of something peaceful in this day and time. And also they want to be involved in art, because a lot of people that do take part in this are not artists, and but they love art, and so that they get to be part of it,
literally.
And so the energy of all those people who have taken the time to send those tea bags, it's in every piece.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
just
really
amazing. And you started the story by talking about the most recent piece that you've been working on, which has another sort of layer to it. So say more about that.
Well, the reason the tea bags are a very static material to work with as an artist. It can be daunting in some ways. How would I use them in some other way and not just redundantly create the same thing? And so that has kept me really interested, because it's a challenge. And so I've learned lots of ways to experiment with how to use tea bags in various forms. But because it's static, and I've spent many years doing predominantly the tea bag art, that I felt a little constricted. So this is kind of where I am. This is a new phase. I will still use the tea bags, no question about it. But I had to sort of break away from them. I wanted to do a piece of art that had no tea bag in it. No tea, no nothing, no strings. But that was a challenge to do that. And it wasn't a monoprint. So I started off slowly, and then...
Just to be clear, this was an internal conversation, because like a lot of artists that I speak with, they get pressure from their gallery or from their collectors that to sort of keeps them feeling pigeonholed in a particular style or method that they've been working. Yeah. But for you, this was something much more personal. This was
very internal. And I just knew that I needed to, probably still I'm in a new phase. I don't know where it will go exactly, but I needed to release myself from that. It wasn't restrictive, but a way of doing art that at that point was making me feel more confined rather than expansive. Yeah.
Well, and which is a great segue to the whole COVID conversation, which you said you would address later. And so this might be a good time to sort of, how did you fare through that? How did you survive COVID, and how have you come out of it, or how are you still coming out of it?
Yeah, I'm still coming. As an artist, as a human being, and having, being older, I was more in danger of being infected. And so there were only 3 people that I would see. And for an extrovert, that's kind of living hell to not be able to see people and talk to people. So I don't know if it was just that, and then it started opening up, but I felt, in a personal way, pretty confined or trapped. And that came through in the art. I mean, in the way I make art. I mean, I just felt flat. I couldn't get much inspiration. It didn't flow like it used to.
And I think I just want to interrupt her for a second. I think it's really important for people to understand that even though some people think that artists are just endlessly creative and that there's just no end to the possibility, that artists too can be impacted by a major shift of life change, whether it's changes in their personal life or these things like COVID. And so even though you're much more accustomed to getting up and coming into a studio and sort of starting a brand new thing, and somehow you tap in and find the inspiration for that, but you can even come up against some stuff. And so as a therapist and as an artist, you've got kind of these double barrel way of approaching a stop like that. What kind of conversations were you having with yourself? What did you do to get back into the studio?
I just kept coming. I just showed up.
And would you sit in a chair and nothing would happen?
I would sit right here in this chair just in this space, and even across the street when I was across the street, and just couldn't do anything. Nothing would come. Here's a piece I did during that time, which I struggle with it. I think I still like it, but it is a tea-bag piece. Believe it or not, the tea bags are all underneath.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You can see it. But this was hard. This was very hard to get myself. I worked at it. I worked on it a long time, which I don't usually.
Well, so for the people who can't see this, we're looking at a canvas that's about what,
maybe 24 by 24.
24 by 24, and it's got the blue in it, which happens when you struggle with something on here. But you've got there's some figurative elements, there's some printmaking elements that I feel in it, and there's some texture, and I can see this tea bag sort of creating the texture onto which
they're there.
But say more about like what you struggled with and what you.
It was flat. I would do something, I would put the tea bags on, and then it just didn't look right, didn't feel right. It just didn't feel right until finally I drew. I did that draw and somehow connected it up. And I used printmaking, which helped. But
so do you consider this one of the pieces that's breaking out of the tea bag universe?
No, I was still hooked in. Mm-hmm. That's early COVID, and it didn't feel like I think I did okay, but it wasn't as flow. It didn't flow. It was hard, hard work. But anyway, now that this last piece that I did, it actually had no tea bags in it, and it just came spontaneously and more easily. I wasn't pushing to get it to. Well, I was for a little while, but then all of a sudden it just opened up, and then I knew what to do. It's hard to explain it because it's very intuitive. It's not like paint. Some people would say, well, I always paint a certain background, or think of the canvas in certain amounts of space or something like that. I don't really have anything in my mind.
So there's no ritual that you have when you approach a canvas for the first time?
No.
How do you even decide what size canvas to start with? Or you just grab one?
That happened to be an old one I hated, and I just painted over it.
So this one that you were just referring to, is that one that you were recently, you said there was one that you were struggling with that reflected a struggle that you were having in your personal life.
Yeah, and that's it. I was struggling in my personal life, with recent deaths of my.
It's okay.
The last two living brothers I have, and they didn't live in the same part of the U.S., or they didn't spend much time together at all, but I was in contact with both of them. They died within 2 weeks of each other, and it was just hard. And so this piece that I did was trying to move away, be more fluid and less constricted by the tea bags. Somehow the feelings of loss and grief came out, but it's not. When you see the piece, it's not like. It doesn't look like grief. It's really beautiful. It's very translucent, and you can see into it. And I don't know. Anyway, it's a weird combination.
Was it a sort of cathartic feeling to let the energy coming through, was it fluid? And
it started at a certain point, but I had to leave the studios more than once. That I just couldn't make anything happen. I couldn't, and I wasn't necessarily thinking of my brothers. I just know that there was grief underneath, and I wasn't trying to repress it, but I wasn't moving into it either. And I think unconsciously the piece was a way of me moving into it. I've had other things, like I waked up in the night and just be sobbing, and so the grief is happening.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like the piece sort of invited you into it.
It kind of did.
Yeah.
It did. It's hard to describe. Yes, it did. Yeah, and I'm glad. I love that piece. So
that's awesome.
I'm hoping that keeps the doorway open to being more fluid and being able to move back and forth with it back to the tea bags and then back into another form that I'm not using them. So I don't know.
Yeah, a theme that comes up a lot in the conversations that I've been having is this sense of permission, like an internal permission to just kind of move in a new direction or to explore something or to, that seems to be the thing that the artists that I speak to really dance with the most, is this sense of permission. And breakthroughs in their work happen when different levels of permission happen in different places.
And I'm fortunate in that, I'm a part owner in the gallery, but we don't say you have to keep doing this one type of art. No, but we don't do that. Our artists, they have their own styles and may be somewhat repetitive in the way they work, but we don't tell each other, you need to make more of these type of things.
Do you find that being the extrovert that you are, that being in a gallery with other artists and the way that particular gallery is structured, that helps your process, being, in an ongoing conversation with other artists that you've gotten to know over time?
Definitely. They felt like family to me during COVID. I mean, I was always close to them anyway, but we would have our regular monthly meeting, and I was so hungry to see people, I would cry. We were having a meeting and I was sitting there crying because I got to see them. But as a therapist, we do different personality testing, and the introvert extrovert thing's pretty obvious. But one of the ways that extroverts get their energy is from being around people, talking to people. Introverts, however, get their energy more from small. And so after those years when we couldn't even talk to people, after that started being released a little bit, I thought, that is so true of me, really. That was my own experiment. I literally didn't have the same energy. And I didn't have that kind of energy to bring to the studio. It just wasn't there, because I would be in a studio by myself.
Yeah, well, I heard that, I read somewhere that during COVID, it wasn't just the regular, it was the regular relationships that we have, but not necessarily our friends and family that we miss the most, but the person at the dry cleaners or the barista that you might not even know their name really, but it's just like that daily contact that we were so used to. And as an extrovert, you were probably feeding on that energy or lack thereof, deprived of it.
Absolutely.
So you feel like things are sort of shifting back,
certainly. And then now, like I talked to 100 people last week at the gallery.
This is new tourists that are coming through.
Yes.
And so is that, I
love it.
You love it. Yeah.
I don't really get tired by the end of those days. I get tired of the days where you just sit there and try to entertain yourself.
Wow. So since we talked a little bit about the loss of your brothers, and you've referred to the fact that you're a later stage artist, do you think about legacy? Do you think about how you want to be known beyond, say, the Teabag project? I don't think you started that as a vanity project by any stretch. Let me just say this. No. I know you very well. But if that were to live on, if just the tagline were to live on, I feel like that would be, that would be satisfying for me to see. Yeah. But what do you think about in terms of?
I don't. The only thing I think about in terms of the legacy, because I don't really think of it as legacy, but the legacy is just, if you people who know me know what I stand for, and that's enough for me. But I have 3 really big tea bag pieces. One has 2,064 tea bags. It's the one that we showed at the Capitol building. I don't know if you were here. No, we didn't get to see it. But it's on a fabric. So I stitched all the tea bags on there with a regular sewing machine. And it's 11 feet by 6 or 7 feet. So, struggling with that much fabric on a regular, how I did it, but on a regular sewing machine. But it's beautiful. And so I use tea bags. I use the flow-through tea bags, and I cut them where they circle around, empty the tea out of them, and then when I stitched them I stitched them where they were joined. And so it looks like, when you see this piece up, and all the different colors of tea bags, and it looks like 2,000 pairs of wings. It's really pretty. And then there's a couple of other ones that are one I did during COVID that's really big. People, they love them. They're big. So and people talk about buying them, but they don't. And because, number one, it's unique, and I think sometimes people are just they like it and they love the idea of it. But where do I put it in my home? I don't know. It's that feeling of not knowing what to do with it, and or where it would fit, or blah blah blah. So anyway, those 4 pieces that I spent a lot of time on, and they're very important to me. I've told my daughter, I've told her that I don't want to die before I get those placed. That's my legacy, those 4 pieces. I don't care what else. But I'd love to sell them for, make a little money to art and public spaces or whatever.
It sounds like a great piece they sound like great pieces for public space or place where people drink tea and one cup of tea at a time, inner peace. Or even a yoga studio, for that matter. That would be really... Yeah. So I really don't like promoting, so I don't spend any time doing it. But before I die, I'm going to get those placed. And I don't mind if I donate them to... I've got a piece or two donated in Arkansas. So I'll just see. I'll either, sell them for a little bit for public space, or I'll donate them. But I do not want them burned. Yes, and ma'am. I'll come back to haunt anyone who dares set a match to them. I feel like that's a really perfect place to stop. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on artstorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.